Hey everybody, how's it going? Aaron Rift here from NoDQ.com to give you my thoughts on the WWE B-PPVs during 2009. By 2009, WWE was in full PG mode, but with that being said, you still had some strong pay-per-view events. You also had some weak ones. It felt like at times WWE was trying to come up with new concepts, but then they would go back and rely on the past and do the same thing over and over again, and I'll get to that later. Let's start off with No Way Out 2009, which is definitely a pay-per-view you should watch. It was on the road to WrestleMania 25, the 25th anniversary WrestleMania, whatever WWE was calling it. You had the two Elimination Chamber matches, similar to 2008, and like 2008, both chamber matches delivered in my opinion. And the thing I really liked is you had Edge lose the WWE title in the first Money in the Bank match and then come back out at the end and win the world title. I thought that was a very intriguing storyline. Although the fact that Edge had to attack Kofi Kingston and take his spot, yeah, that was a little bit over the top, that Kofi would just be laid out and he cannot compete in the match and Edge is just allowed to take his spot. So does that mean anybody can do that? It was definitely a bit of a logic issue, but I'll let it slide. I like the storyline of Edge losing one title and winning the other title. I would definitely recommend checking out both chamber matches, especially the first one. I like the ending sequence of the first one with Triple H and The Undertaker. It was very similar to the previous year when it was down to Undertaker and Batista. Really good stuff. And the other big match on this show was Randy Orton versus Shane McMahon, which I thought was a good match, but I wasn't a big fan of the storyline. You know, Randy Orton had so much momentum heading into 2009 when he punted Vince McMahon, but then after the Royal Rumble, Stephanie McMahon brought out Shane. Instead of firing Randy Orton, they had a solution. They were going to take care of Randy Orton with Shane McMahon. This was just ridiculous, and Orton having to sell for Shane, wasn't a big fan of that. I felt it did a lot of damage to Orton's character at the time. And in this match, it was more the same. At one point, Orton got busted open from a monitor shot. It was a very physical match, I will say that, and Shane McMahon did his usual crazy antics. He did the coast to coast and various other moves. But in the end, it took legacy helping Randy Orton for Orton to beat Shane McMahon. So I wasn't a fan of that Orton needed his two buddies to help him beat Shane. He couldn't handle Shane on his own. Randy Orton, the top heel who you're supposed to take seriously heading into the main event at WrestleMania, can barely squeak by a victory over Shane McMahon. I don't know. Wasn't a fan of it. But the two chamber matches, like I said, definitely worth watching. Next up, we have Backlash 2009, which I thought from top to bottom, with a few minor exceptions, was a really strong show. I felt that Backlash was a very solid pay-per-view. You had Christian and Jack Swagger for the ECW title open up the pay-per-view, which I thought was a very good match. And then you had Chris Jericho versus Ricky Steamboat in a one-on-one match. And this alone, for the novelty of Ricky Steamboat making a comeback and competing in a WWE ring again, this is worth watching. And Chris Jericho was just amazing as a heel at this time. I mean, he was really at the top of his game. So this was fun to watch. And even in a losing effort, Steamboat came off very respectable. So I really liked this a lot. And then you had Matt Hardy versus Jeff Hardy in an I Quit match, which I actually thought was better than the WrestleMania match. It was still not as good as I was hoping for from those two, but I do like the finish and the storyline here where Jeff tied up Matt Hardy on the table and then threatened to do a swanton on him. And, you know, I guess that this was so devastating that Matt had to beg for forgiveness and all this stuff. I mean, Matt's performance was really strong here. I thought that was the best thing about this match. Once again, a little bit of a logic issue here. I mean, is it really that bad to get a swanton through a table? I mean, Matt was acting like he was going to be murdered. It was a bit over the top, but, you know, once again, I'll let it slide. I thought it was a unique storyline, and, you know, at least the finish here was well done. Although, you know, I wasn't really a big fan of the Matt Hardy, Jeff Hardy feud to begin with. I thought that that was a disappointment. But this was a good ending for it, in my opinion. Although it really wasn't over. It continued, but I'll get to that in a few minutes here. The biggest negative on this show was a segment with Santino, who was dressed up as Santina and the Great Khali. I thought that this segment was awful, and it felt like the whole purpose of the segment was to make fun of JR. You had Santina saying she was in love with JR, and they called him Barbecue Man, and Michael Cole was making fun of JR. And you could see the look on JR's face. He was not amused with this, and I don't think anybody else was. In my opinion, this was when Santino's character really jumped the shark. I mean, I was a big fan of Santino when he first went heel in 2007, but by this time, I mean, he was just getting so annoying, in my opinion, and this segment was a complete flop. I wasn't a fan of it. You had Randy Orton winning the WWE title in a 6-man match where if he pinned Triple H, he would win the title. This was a good match, although at the end you had Randy Orton hitting an RKO, which Triple H kicked out of. The problem is that the timekeeper rang the bell immediately without the referee signaling for the bell, and Triple H did kick out, and the referee just stood up and said no, it was a 2 count. So you know, that was a botch by the timekeeper. But other than that, I mean, this was a good match. Randy Orton hit the punt, won the title. You know, it was fine. Then you had the main event, Edge versus John Cena for the world title in a last man standing match, which I thought was really good. I mean, Edge and John Cena had so many good matches against each other, and this one was no exception. You had John Cena literally giving the AA to Edge into the crowd. So you had a bunch of people, plants, whatever you want to call them, that caught Edge in the crowd. I thought that that was well done. That was a cool, unique spot. You know, felt a little bit like ECW. You know, they fought in the equipment area, and then the finish, you had a big spotlight as part of the set, and when Cena was about to win, you had Big Show come out and choke slam John Cena through the spotlight, which was a really cool spot. It was cool, but then watching it, I realized, oh great, another John Cena Big Show feud, and I'll get to that in a few minutes here. But overall, I mean, it was a very entertaining match. So, in my opinion, this was definitely a thumbs up show, Backlash. Moving on here to Judgment Day. I think the undercard was solid for this show, but I felt that it wasn't all that eventful of a pay-per-view, and it's one of those pay-per-views that is forgettable. And, you know, typically Judgment Day was one of the more forgettable pay-per-views. I mean, you had one segment where The Miz was coming out and basically just killing time. You know, you're paying $45, $50 or whatever for this pay-per-view, and they do these long filler segments. They had a Cubs player out there. Then you had Santino coming out, and it dragged on. It felt like WWE was just trying to kill time, and you had the announcers with their fake laughter. I mean, it was really bad. And Chavo came out. The whole thing was just a waste of time. You had Batista versus Randy Orton for the WWE title, which ended when Randy Orton slapped the referee. This had been done several times in the past where Orton purposely got himself disqualified. Very annoying when you're spending money on a pay-per-view and you get a DQ finish like this. I wasn't a fan of it. After the match, Legacy beat up Batista until Ric Flair made the save, and this might have been Ric Flair's last pay-per-view appearance before heading over to TNA. Then you had John Cena versus The Big Show, and all I can say about this is that if you've seen one Cena Big Show match, you've seen them all. I mean, really nothing to it at all. Main event was Edge versus Jeff Hardy, which was a good match, but nothing spectacular. And of course, you have Matt Hardy with the outside interference, and Edge ends up retaining the title. Whatever. You know, kind of lame for a pay-per-view to have the 2 title matches not be clean. It's a skippable pay-per-view. Let's just put it that way. Alright, next up we have Extreme Rules, which I thought was a strong pay-per-view. It's hard for Extreme Rules to be a bad pay-per-view when you have all these different stipulation matches. And this one was pretty good. You had Chris Jericho versus Rey Mysterio. I thought that this was a really good match. Jericho and Mysterio had an awesome feud. I mean, that was definitely one of the best feuds of 2009. And the finish I thought was great. You had Jericho grabbing Rey's mask, and when Rey was trying to cover up, that's when Jericho covered him for the pinfall and won the match. I thought that this was a brilliant finish. Really well done. You had CM Punk versus Umaga in a strap match, and I mentioned this because unfortunately it was Umaga's last match in WWE, so I thought I would make note of that. More lame stuff with Santino as Santina. You had a hog pen match with Santina and Vicky Guerrero. This was dumb. There was a backstage segment with them, and you had Goldust coming in, and he actually dropped an S-bomb during the segment, which I thought was funny on this PG show. Batista won the WWE title from Randy Orton in a cage match. Really watered down cage match. I mean, no blood because it's PG. And just wasn't much to it. I mean, it was an average cage match at best. And then you had John Cena versus The Big Show in a submission match. This was pretty boring. I mean, it's a submission match with John Cena. We all know he's not giving up. So it is what it is. Cena in a submission match, whatever. Main event, ladder match, Jeff Hardy versus Edge for the world title. Great stuff from these two. I mean, I thought that this was an awesome ladder match. They took a double bump off of a ladder, threw a ladder on the outside. Hardy countered the spear in the midair and hit a twist of fate. And Edge got stuck at the finish, which I thought was very well done. I mean, they had some creative finishes on this show. I like the finish for this one. Hardy wins the title. But then, hold on a second. CM Punk comes out, cashes in Money in the Bank on Jeff Hardy, and this is the beginning of CM Punk's heel turn, which of course would lead to the Straight Edge Society and then eventually the Pipe Bomb. So this was a very defining moment in CM Punk's career to cash in Money in the Bank here and begin his journey as a heel in the company. So very significant stuff. Overall, thumbs up pay-per-view. Next up we have The Bash. Not the Great American Bash, just The Bash. Oh, okay. This pay-per-view had some entertaining matches. I thought the ECW Scramble match was pretty good. Chris Jericho and Rey Mysterio. Hell of a match here. You had Rey Mysterio putting the mask on the line, and lots of near falls in the match. I mean, they did a ton of near falls, and this was great stuff. I mean, like I said earlier, Jericho and Mysterio had an amazing feud here. And once again, another very clever finish where the previous time you had Jericho grabbing the mask, and he tried to do it again this time, but it backfired on him. Rey had a second mask on. He smartened up. The babyface got smart, and he outsmarted the heel, and Rey Mysterio ended up winning the match. Really well done. I thought that this was great. Can't say anything bad about it. You did have some bad things on this show. You had Khali in a pay-per-view match against Dolph Ziggler. I do note this because it was Ziggler's first singles appearance on a WWE B pay-per-view. But, you know, anytime you have Khali on a pay-per-view, you're just scratching your head. Why? And he was a babyface by this point. Who cares? Main event. Well, actually, we're not at the main event yet. CM Punk versus Jeff Hardy for the world title. This was cheap. You had Hardy pinning CM Punk and everyone thinking Hardy won. I mean, this was really a dusty finish at its best. Everyone thought Hardy won. His music played, but then the referee said, no, wait a minute. CM Punk had his foot on the rope, and then they restarted the match, and then CM Punk eye-poked the referee and got disqualified intentionally. Pretty lame stuff. I mean, it was very cheap, like I said. And then you had the main event, a 3 Stages of Hell match, which I thought should have been a lot better. Randy Orton versus Triple H for the WWE title. Basically, they just did the first 2 falls extremely quickly. The the first two, the three stages of hell. Triple H got DQ'd right away with a chair shot to the head. So this was before the chair shots to the head got banned in WWE. And I guess from a storyline perspective, it makes sense. Triple H gets himself disqualified, but Orton is so beat up now from a chair shot, I guess. And then he immediately hits a pedigree to win the second fall. And then it just goes straight to the third fall, which is a stretcher match. So kind of weird booking here. Not really sure what to make of it. Not sure if I'm a fan of them blowing through the two matches right away, but it is what it is. And then you had Legacy come out, and this was fairly predictable. I figured, Legacy would come out, and sure enough, they did. And Orton retains, or wins the title, I forgot. But Orton left as a champion. Alright, next up we have Night of Champions. So yet another WWE pay-per-view. I think this was like 3 weeks after the Bash. I mean, between Extreme Rules and the Bash and Night of Champions, I mean, I'm not even sure if it was a month period between these pay-per-views. So they were going through these pay-per-views very quickly here. One of the big matches was a triple threat, a rematch from WrestleMania 24. You had Orton versus Triple H versus John Cena. Once again, very predictable. They did do a double submission on Orton. So the weird thing about Orton is they made him look weak a lot at these events. I mean, he wasn't a dominant heel. He was more like a cowardly heel who had his henchmen, the Legacy members, come in and do his bidding. Orton was tapped out by a double submission from Cena and Triple H, but the referee had to just restart the match. And then, of course, Legacy comes out and Orton retains the title. So once again, kind of a cheap cop-out finish. You had Jeff Hardy winning the world title from CM Punk. CM Punk was a full-blown heel by this point. He cut a really entertaining promo. This is when he was really starting to do the whole straight edge, I'm better than you as a heel gimmick, and just ripping into people and kids and parents for letting their kids be Jeff Hardy fans, supporting an addict and all that stuff. I mean, it was great. The promo was maybe the best thing on this entire show. Hardy won the title. Good match, but beyond the two main event matches, I mean, this was a very forgettable show. Next up, you have Breaking Point. This was an interesting experiment by WWE to do a themed pay-per-view. This was the first, well, not really the first. Extreme Rules was a themed pay-per-view, but they were going with this idea of replacing all the old pay-per-views like Unforgiven and No Mercy with themed pay-per-views, and this was replacing Unforgiven. They did an all-submission pay-per-view for the three top matches, of course. You had Legacy versus DX in a submission match, tag team Falls Count Anywhere submission match. This was entertaining. They brought in the concession area. The storyline here was that Legacy was dividing and conquering. So when Triple H was beat up in the back, they took out Shawn Michaels at ringside and they did a double submission on him, and Triple H was unable to make it back to the ring in time. So I actually thought that this was a good finish, and it was a good match. Probably the best match on the show. More Khali crap. You had Khali versus Kane, a rematch from SummerSlam. Like, we really needed to see that. Yeah, the less said about this, the better. Randy Orton versus John Cena in an I Quit match. We all know how this goes by now. John Cena I Quit matches. I mean, come on now. And yet another Cena versus Orton match. This feud was revisited from 2007 and really 2008 as well. They had a series of matches. And the feud just continued again in 2009. Cena won, of course, because it's an I Quit match, and John Cena never gives up. Main event was Undertaker versus CM Punk. Huge disappointment. WWE had done so well to build up CM Punk at SummerSlam the previous month when he beat Jeff Hardy, only for them to drop the ball on him here. Undertaker basically taps him out like in 5 minutes. Really quick match. Then Teddy Long comes out and says that the Hell's Gate submission is banned by Vicky Guerrero. So they restart the match, and then CM Punk puts Undertaker in the Anaconda Vice, and the referee immediately calls for the bell. You know, it's the recreation of Montreal. This pay-per-view was in Montreal, so they had to do yet another finish, doing a spoof of Montreal. It was dumb. Wasn't a big fan of this at all, and I felt it really hurt Punk. And speaking of hurting Punk, the next pay-per-view was Hell in the Cell. The first Hell in the Cell themed pay-per-view. 3 Hell in the Cell matches, which I think is overkill in general. And especially in a PG era, doing Hell in the Cell matches when there's no blood and they're toning down the violence. I thought all 3 Cell matches were disappointing, but especially CM Punk and The Undertaker. They did have a chair shot to the head, so it wasn't banned yet, but very simple match with Undertaker countering the chairs and hitting a choke slam to win the title. It was really tame for Hell in the Cell match. I mean, probably up to that point the tamest Hell in the Cell match. And once again, Taker just beat CM Punk like CM Punk's just a random mid-carder. Wasn't a fan of it. Then you have the other Hell in the Cell matches. You have John Cena versus Randy Orton again. Cena had the match won. Orton looking weak as usual, of course. But the ref was down. And then Orton eventually recovered and hit the punt and won the title. Once again, a very tame Hell in the Cell match. And pretty slow paced, actually. There was one non-Hell in the Cell match on the show that I thought was really good, and that was John Morrison versus Dolph Ziggler. I would definitely recommend this match. I actually like this feud. I always remember this feud because Morrison called Ziggler Mr. Ziggles in the build-up. I don't know why I remember that, but the match itself was really good. Then you had the main event, which was DX versus Legacy, Hell in a Cell. I did like the storyline here. You know, they were playing off the previous month with Triple H being unable to save Shawn Michaels and the whole divide and conquer strategy by Legacy. So they did the same thing here, where Triple H got locked out of the cell and they beat the crap out of Shawn Michaels. The biggest problem here is that it dragged on for way too long and the crowd just died during this match. I mean, the crowd heat was really disappointing. You know, you would think the people would be just going crazy wanting Triple H to get back in that cage, but they really weren't. There wasn't much of a crowd reaction. You know, Triple H eventually got the bolt cutters or whatever to open up the cage again. This thing just took forever. It really dragged out. They did the finish where Shawn Michaels hit Sweet Chin Music, and then actually Cody Rhodes got locked out of the cage, and Ted DiBiase was on his own against Michaels and Triple H, and Michaels hit the Sweet Chin Music, and then Triple H with the sledgehammer shot. The crowd kind of got into the end, but still, I thought it was a pretty disappointing reaction, actually, for this match. But this was one of the best matches on the show besides Morrison and Ziggler. So, overall, I mean, okay pay-per-view, but with the Hell in the Cell stipulation, you would expect more, and I felt that it would have been better if you just had one really strong Hell in the Cell match instead of doing 3 watered-down Hell in the Cell matches. That's just my take on it. Next up, we have bragging rights, which was another new concept where you would have Team Raw versus Team SmackDown, with the winner getting a bragging rights trophy. I thought that this pay-per-view was good. I would say it's a good pay-per-view. Not so much based on the Raw versus SmackDown match. I thought that was quite predictable, actually, because you had Big Show on Team Raw and Jericho on Team SmackDown. And of course, I mean, going in, the predictable finish was Big Show would turn on his team. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. So, you know, very predictable stuff. One of the most entertaining things on this show, actually, was the Fatal 4-Way World Title match. Batista had the match won. Undertaker was defending the title, but Rey Mysterio broke up the pin when Batista was about to win. It was every man for himself, but Batista was pissed off because he was that close to beating Undertaker and winning the title. After the match, Undertaker retained the title, and they did an in-ring interview segment with Batista and Rey Mysterio, and Batista said, "I'm tired of my best friend stabbing me in the back," and he said to Mysterio, I'm going to rip your head off. And then he just beats the crap out of Rey Mysterio, making an awesome heel turn. I mean, this was a really well done heel turn. And Batista grabs Rey on the outside and says, "You're supposed to be my friend." And then he just throws him into the barricade. This was great. I mean, Batista really shined as a heel. I mean, this was long overdue, and it was awesome. Great heel turn. Main event, Randy Orton versus John Cena again, this time an Iron Man match. I have mixed feelings about this one because I felt it was a really entertaining match, but at the same time it felt like they needed to drag this out to 60 minutes, so they used literally every single gimmick in the book to drag this thing out to 60 minutes. So, I mean, that's the one big criticism, but it was entertaining. Cena got busted open the hard way with the microphone early in the match, and they actually stopped the clock for a few seconds so the doctor could check on Cena. Cena snapped, he went crazy. They did a double pin with an RKO and an attitude adjustment, so each guy got a fall. Cena hit a super AA. Legacy ended up coming out, of course, to help Orton, since they always have to do that. Kofi Kingston made the save. This was the beginning of the Randy Orton-Kofi Kingston feud. Then they started brawling on the outside of the ring. Cena got thrown into the lighting grid. That was a cool spot. And then Orton tried to use the pyro on John Cena. Cena was laid out on the stage, and Orton went over to the pyro guy and started pushing the button. So he was trying to murder John Cena on live television. This was quite a bit over the top. And this just dragged on quite a bit also. Cena was able to move out of the way. Back in the ring, they kept trading falls, and it would be tied, and then Orton would get the advantage, and they would brawl in the crowd some more. They'd get back in the ring, and towards the end, Randy Orton would start trying to stall. He had the advantage over Cena, 5-4, and he tried to just stall until the clock ran out, but eventually Cena was able to do an AA off the steps through a table to make it 5-5. And then Cena tried to dive through a table and missed. Ref got knocked down, and Randy Orton had the match won at this point when it was 5-5, but the referee was down. He missed a punt, and then Cena was able to get the STF onto Orton, and then with 5 seconds left, Orton taps out, and Cena wins 6-5 and becomes the WWE Champion. And that is the end of the John Cena versus Randy Orton feud, at least for a couple of years. Alright, final pay-per-view here, final B pay-per-view, TLC. This was another new themed pay-per-view replacing Armageddon, where you would have a TLC match, a ladders match, a chairs match. Little bit over the top here. Just going overboard with the stipulations, in my opinion. You had Christian versus Shelton Benjamin, which I thought was a really good match. One of Christian's best singles matches. Christian got busted open the hard way from the ladder, and they actually had to stop the match so the doctor could sew him up or whatever, or glue the wound together, whatever they do. The crowd started booing this, by the way. They weren't a fan of the match being stopped to clean up the blood. Really good match. And then the finish was Christian doing a splash from the outside through a ladder. This was really well done. Really entertaining match. There were some bad things about this pay-per-view. First off, the crowd heat. I don't know what it was, but in San Antonio for this show, I felt the crowd heat was really disappointing, and I'll get to that more in a minute here. I thought the announcing was very weak on this show. This was the first pay-per-view where you did not have JR. I think he was at Bragging Rights. I don't remember for sure or not. But this was the first pay-per-view where they were doing a three-person team where they just combined the announcers from both shows. So it was Michael Cole, Jerry Lawler, and Matt Striker. I'm not a fan of Matt Striker's commentary. I mean, I find him to be annoying personally. I know some people out there think he's underrated. I'm not one of those people. One thing he does all the time that bothers me is when he reacts to a move, he just makes a grunt or a sound. He goes like, "Oh," whenever somebody gets hit with a move. And in my opinion, that's not good announcing. Good announcing is actually talking about what's happening and analyzing what's happening. And when you just react to a move by going, oh, I'm not a fan of that. I think it's very amateurish. Just my opinion. And Stryker did it a lot during these pay-per-views. I do feel he's gotten a bit better with Lucha Underground, but you know that's getting into another topic. They did the whole angle with Mickie James as Piggy James, which was in very poor taste. I thought it was just not entertaining. Really sad to see them do that kind of storyline. And you know, years later, WWE would do this whole anti-bullying campaign, but they would do this kind of storyline where it feels like they're bullying her in real life because of her weight. And to me, that's not cool. So I wasn't a fan of that. Did not find it entertaining. You had John Cena versus Sheamus in his first B pay-per-view appearance, going for the WWE Championship, and it was a tables match, so WWE had an excuse for John Cena to lose without him being pinned or made to submit. He went through a table, but the thing is, Sheamus didn't even really put him through a table, and usually that's the stipulation. One guy has to initiate a move onto the other guy through the table, and basically Cena just fell off the ring apron through a table. It's like he slipped almost. And they even played this up on commentary. Lawler was saying, you know, I think Cena just slipped and fell off. So, you know, it made Sheamus look really weak winning the WWE title. You know, they couldn't even get a decisive win over John Cena in a tables match of all things. And then you had Batista versus Undertaker for the world title. Not one of the better Batista-Undertaker matches. The crowd was dead for it, and I wasn't a fan of the finish at all. You had Batista hitting a low blow on the Undertaker and then using a chair shot to the head, which I find interesting. You know, when I was watching these pay-per-views, I was keeping track of the chair shots to the head because I was just trying to see when it was that WWE decided to ban the chair shots to the head. And I know that by WrestleMania 2011, when Undertaker and Triple H did the chair shot to the head, they got in trouble for that. But as late as December 2009, they were still doing them. So it must have been sometime in 2010 that the chair shots to the head were banned. But yeah, basically Batista won the match here, but then Teddy Long came out and said that because Batista hit a low blow, the match was being restarted. What? Is it the referee's decision final? And don't guys do low blows all the time? Why is this all of a sudden an issue? I thought that this was lame. And was it Teddy Long a heel a few months earlier? And now all of a sudden he's a babyface again? Whatever. Undertaker quickly won the match and retained the title. Wasn't really a big fan of this. You had Kofi Kingston versus Randy Orton, which should have been a classic. Should have been Kofi Kingston's rise in WWE. He was really gaining momentum, but this match definitely stalled his push. The crowd was dead again for this one, and Randy Orton won. Wasn't much to it. It really stalled Kofi's momentum, I thought. Very counterproductive. Then you had the main event. You had DX versus Jericho in a TLC match. There was some heat for this, but not really as much as you would expect with Shawn Michaels in San Antonio, his hometown. Big Show destroyed the ladder. That was one of the big angles in this match. He had basically half a ladder, which did not make any sense because he had tons of ladders out there, yet you have them using the one piece of the ladder. You had Chris Jericho trying to get on top of Big Show's shoulders, which made no sense. Why don't they just grab a ladder, Jericho climbs, and Big Show is the lookout? Instead, they set themselves up to be attacked. When Jericho's on top of Big Show's shoulders, DX is able to attack both of them. Didn't make any sense. Made the heels look really dumb. And then Jericho ended up botching the table spot to the outside during this as well. And then DX used the ladder that Big Show broke, the half of a ladder, instead of the other ladders. You had Triple H holding the piece of the ladder so Shawn Michaels could climb it. Why not just grab a fresh ladder and climb that? I thought both teams looked like idiots in this match. So yeah, wasn't a huge fan of it, and it should have been better. But I mean, it was still a good match, and I guess they're trying to be creative with the broken ladder or whatever. But I just felt it made everybody look dumb. Just my take on it. So that'll wrap it up for my thoughts on the WWE B pay-per-views from 2009. Leave a comment. Let me know what your favorite and least favorite moments were from these pay-per-view events. Stay tuned to NoDQ.com for the very latest in wrestling, and I will see you guys next time.